We all have a pretty good feeling that Zach Calzada will be the starter for the Auburn Tigers this season. But what would it take for him to not be the starter this season?
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. I want to talk about quarterbacks today, and we will be joined now by Mike G of the War Report, a little War Report Wednesday.
Yep.
Mike G, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you believe Zach Calzada will be the starter this season as well, correct?
Well, I think he has just as good a chance as anybody in this race.
But if you had to pick somebody today, who are you picking?
Oh, see, that's tough.
Is it? I thought last week you were picking Calzada.
Well, I was expressing that I feel like he's made up some ground in the race, certainly, and that he is in good shape going into the summer. He was hurt, so he was somewhat limited, but he has impressed a lot of his teammates, as they've told us. So I think this is a three-man race with an outside shot for Robby Ashford. And
so right now you're 1A, 1B, and then 2.
Correct. Yeah, and I'm flip-flopping on 1A, 1B. I think it could go either way.
That surprises me. I thought you were all in on, projecting Calzada to be the guy. Okay, so this is going to be a different conversation than what I was expecting.
Yeah, listen, it's hard to know what's in a coach's mind. So this is not really about what I think, but based on recent interviews and all the information we've gathered after interviewing Harsin, I think it's up in the air. I don't think Harsin's ready to name a guy. I think he's going to let him compete over the summer. He, expressed some things about quarterback philosophy. And, the fact of the matter is TJ Finley has been under the staff for over a year now.
Right.
And I think that gives him some edge in knowing the playbook. And if he has demonstrated an understanding of the concepts and systems that they want to run, how could that not give him a little bit of an edge? Now, in terms of actual performance, TJ had some ground to make up from last year. I don't think anybody could, honestly say that based on the last 3 games of last year that he solidified the job. I don't think he closed the door during the spring.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that. I think where the disagreement comes from his last 3 games was how much does that matter because of the offense not being built around him and all of that.
Well, they brought in 2 quarterbacks. So, they obviously wanted options. They obviously wanted options, I think. Yeah. And then they brought in a guy who started a lot of games in our league last year. And, for all intents and purposes, is working his butt off this spring. So this will be a battle. I think this will be one of the first real QB battles that we've seen at Auburn in quite some time. And I'm pretty confident that whoever comes out on top will not have a stranglehold on the job until at least midseason if they're performing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll have a chance to firmly have it if they beat Penn State. If they look good against Penn State, it's probably theirs, right?
Maybe but there are some scenarios where Sean Clifford's back for his 6th year. He played well against us last year, but he certainly had an up and down season. Sure. He had an all-world receiver and Jahan Dotson, and he did not take full advantage of that. So if we are in low-scoring, drag-out defenses, squeaking us out type games, I would not leave it past the coach to make a switch at quarterback.
Yeah, but I'm saying if a quarterback goes out there, whether it's Calzada or Finley, I don't think it'll be Ashford. But we'll put him in that conversation as well. Whoever it is, if they perform well against Penn State, I don't think you can take the job away from them unless they really just drop the ball several games later.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now,
okay,
where are we drawing the line at performing well?
I think taking care of the football. I think being efficient. I'm not talking about going out there and slinging it for 300 yards a game, but I'm talking about, north of a 65% passer, completion.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good, but I just don't think they're going to be airing it out. And I think they're going to be, a lot of shorter passes. I think they're going to do a lot of stuff behind the line of scrimmage as far as getting the ball to receivers quickly, and letting them do things with it. Much like we saw them do with Kobe Hudson at times last year. But this year, I think it'll be, a Malcolm Johnson Jr., a Javarius Johnson.
Right.
Maybe Ted Jackson. I don't think he's that type of receiver, but maybe. But so I think it's going to be a lot of that. I don't think Auburn fans should expect a quarterback to go out there and average over 250 yards passing a game. I just don't think that's what this team is going to be. I don't think that's the way this roster is made. I think the quarterbacks have the ability to do it. I just think with these receivers, and I mean, you and I have talked at length about, pass protection and things like that. I just don't think that's going to be what performing well looks like for this Auburn offense. I think it's going to be more about efficiency and taking care of the football.
I think it's going to be about pushing the ball down the field.
Okay.
And I think that is going to be the bane or the savior of whoever starts at quarterback this year. Last year, there was one of the biggest reasons our run game suffered. Number one, our O-line was not built for a smash mouth running game. It just wasn't. It was built for misdirection, what Gus was trying to do. It was always going to take them more than a year to get these linemen in the type of physical shape.
Sure.
The offensive line is such a developmental position. You don't come in and then, in one spring, change your body into the type of system that Bryan Harsin wanted to run. But because we could not push the ball down the field last year, the defensive strategy against Auburn was tee off on the run game and get after the quarterback. There was little to no respect for our ability to be able to throw down the field. Now, I've said this on previous episodes. When we were able to do that, the offense looked unstoppable, right? Nobody complained about the run game. It looked good, but you cannot, five guys cannot consistently block 7 or 8. Just doesn't work, man. Eventually, they're going to plug gaps. They're going to stop your run game. And I think that if the quarterback, whoever he is, can push the ball down the field and make us a down-the-field threat, it will take a lot of pressure off the rest of the offense. What we've been hoping, how it's looked in the past, has been the run game has provided that relief for the passing game. It's not going to work. It's not going to work that way this year, Zach. We have to take some pressure off the run game. Because if this line run blocks at the same rate that they did last year, we're going to have a tough season. We're going to be a dogfight every game.
Of course. So I think, that's kind of why I'm expecting more stuff to happen behind the line of scrimmage, because I mean, all of those things, the quarterback gets the ball and gets it out to a receiver is essentially a running play, and I think that's what they're going to have to do to make people play, wider out, farther away from the middle of the field.
Yeah, you just can only throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage so much before you have to push it up the field, because defenses.
I'm not talking about every play.
Right. But I mean, again, defenses are smart. They're fast. When we went through our film review with Harsin, we picked 3 plays, one for each quarterback, and he thought he said something I thought was funny, but also very true. The first play was TJ Finley completion to Cedric Jackson right up the middle. It was a complete dime.
That was probably the best pass in A-Day.
Right. He said the first thing wrong with this play is 3rd and 16. We cannot find ourselves behind the chains, because that's how we ended up passing the ball way more than running it last year.
Totally.
Was trying to throw ourselves out of holes. And the inability to complete those downfield passes at a high enough clip to keep defenses honest, put a lot of pressure on other areas of the offense, and particularly on the quarterback. Now that next throw becomes more crucial, and that was a great throw by TJ. But the preceding 2 plays that put us in 3rd and 15 due to lack of execution were not good.
Right.
And you don't want to have to need that throw from your quarterback consistently this year. It's just not going to work. So to your point, defenses are going to sniff that. They're going to play that. If I'm a betting man, I'm playing all screens. I'm playing uptight, and I'm just making Auburn prove that they can beat me down the field. Mm-hmm. That's what we've put on tape. And the quarterback's job, whoever holds on to the quarterback job, will be the guy who can complete those downfield passes at a high enough clip. I think right now, if I had to give an edge to Calzada, based on what we've seen on tape in real life in the SEC, you'd have to give Calzada the edge. You just would. Look at our game versus them, right? He didn't have a great game, but I'll tell you what, he made 2 to 3 more passes down the field than our quarterback did.
Yeah, I mean, if you get 2 or 3 of those against South Carolina or even against Alabama or Mississippi State, it's a totally different outlook of what happened this past season. You mentioned your interview with Harsin. There was something that he brought up that I want to touch on in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the often pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while they're going to deliver it? And, maybe their warehouse doesn't even, carry the brand that you had in mind. Just go to rockauto.com from your phone or from your laptop or your work computer. I don't know, but head over to rockauto.com and you'll see that, one, it's significantly cheaper. I mean, some folks say 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts just by going to rockauto.com, and it shows up right at your door. Rockauto.com is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car, truck, or SUV. And write Locked On Auburn in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. That is at rockauto.com. Mike G, something that Harsin talked about in y'all's conversation with him, and I'm paraphrasing here. If you know the exact quote, please correct me. But the gist of it was, just because you pick a quarterback doesn't mean other quarterbacks aren't going to play. Do you believe that? Do you believe that that's going to happen? Because I know we've talked about this a little bit before with Robby Ashford, and you believe there'll be packages and things like that for him. Or is this just kind of him saying what he needs to say to keep all the quarterbacks on his roster happy and believe they have a shot at playing time?
Well, he said you can play more than one quarterback. And there are a couple different ways you can take that statement. Number one, the guy you pick doesn't perform, so you got to go to the second guy, or the guy you pick gets hurt. And both these quarterbacks are very familiar with that scenario. If you think about it, the TJ Finley, he won the number 2 spot in both his stops, and the starter got hurt, and he got thrown in. Same with Zach Calzada last year. Haynes King won that job. He got thrown in. Right. And he didn't play well versus Colorado. They snuck out the win, but man, he struggled in that game and then picked it up after that. He found his footing. They had some disappointing losses.
I mean, obviously, if somebody gets hurt, you're going to play more than one quarterback. But I don't think he's projecting people to get hurt. Do you?
I think that he's planning for multiple contingencies because that happened to him last year. That was a real scenario for him last year, right?
They went out take it that way. That's interesting.
Yeah, they went out and got TJ Finley because they felt like D. Davis was not a viable option. And, obviously Grant Lloyd wasn't either. So you went out and you got a quarterback because you've got to be 2 quarterbacks deep in this league. Too many teams we've seen, even last year, the starter gets hurt a lot.
So outside of injuries, the injury conversation is pointless. So we're all in agreement there. Now, outside of that.
Now, in terms of playing 2 quarterbacks, I don't think that scenario involves TJ Finley and Zach Calzada. I think Robby Ashford is the winner in the 2 quarterback conversation because if you bring him in, it's a real wrinkle to bring him in and have they've been raving about his speed, by the way.
Sure.
Athleticism, and have a legit run threat. According to Robby, he didn't even show us everything he had in the tank during A-Day. He was like, Mike, I got some slides to the side here that I was saving. But he can run. And to have a guy come in and be a true dual threat may throw people off a lot. And Ashford has a chance to audition for the job in case somebody gets hurt, or even for next year if he plays well in the opportunities. Because one thing that Harsin said during our interview was, these guys know they have to work with what the coaches give them. It's just not everybody after spring, man. Not everybody's going to get equal opportunities. We started with 5 quarterbacks on the roster, and they had to dwindle it down pretty quick into spring practice because you got to divvy out reps.
Sure.
After the spring, it narrows, and going into the fall, two guys are going to get a majority of the reps. And I think that Robby Ashford stands to gain the most. I think that's on his mind as well, too. He's just too good an athlete not to use at some point.
So going into fall, you think all three of them will be getting relevant reps in practice, or do you think just two of them?
Yeah, I think all three of them. But Robby situationally, though.
So
does that make sense?
You don't think Robby will be getting snaps to like run the first team offense? You think he'll just be getting snaps to?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I think they put in a package for Robby. They put in a package for Robby, and
if that's true, it'll be interesting to see how, one, it looks on the depth chart, and two, like if a backup quarterback is needed, and hopefully it's not, would he be the backup quarterback, or would he still have the same role? If Calzada starts, and then Finley would have to, come in and relieve. Like that would be an interesting thing to see happen.
How I see it playing out, Zach, is I don't think it starts out the way you just described with him not even being the backup. I think that if in the limited reps that he get, if he comes in and performs well, he has a chance to take the number 2 job from whoever's in the number 2 spot. Because if you got a guy who can run and throw, and be a good threat in this league, it's too much of an advantage over the other two, right? We know
I'm there with you, man. I'm at this point now where like I think Calzada is going to start. I think most people believe that. The interesting thing after that, though, is like, okay, if Calzada is unable to play for whatever reason, or he needs to be pulled, I'm at the point now where like, I think I'd rather see Ashford in there. And it's no disrespect to TJ. It's just, what else is going to change? What else is going to change from what we've seen so far? And you mentioned he's been in the system for over a year now, which is obviously important. But I was really expecting TJ to turn it on in spring, and we just didn't ever really hear that narrative emerge from practice. And I think that's a really big deal. And so you bring the upside of Ashford, who I do not think has a chance for the starting job, but I do think he has a chance to be a backup and a role player. I don't think he's going to have as many design plays, or he may have the design plays, but I don't think we're going to see him in relevant snaps, assuming the starting quarterback is healthy that often. I think you and I disagree there. But as a backup, I think I would almost rather see that.
Yeah, I think you can make a case, Zach, for Robby or TJ at this point. I don't put any stock into what we didn't hear coming out of spring, because they're not going to tell you anyway, right? Like, and the reports, unless these people were, at practice physically watching, because I was trying to tell people, if you're making your judgments off A-Day, I think that's a mistake. Because the coaches are making their judgments off the totality of the spring, and we don't for sure know what happened in the totality of spring. We know that TJ still did enough to go out there first, and get a majority of the first team reps, but Calzada didn't factor in because of the injury. And after, our, big friend of the show, Chris Todd, probably one of the most underrated QBs to come through Auburn. He had it up here, and
he had all the passing records. Then Cam came the next year,
right? I mean, I'm telling, and didn't have the strongest arm,
sure, but
he was one of the hardest working, and he was one of the smartest. And when you listen to Chris tell the story about when Gus and Chiz told him that he won the starting job, it was pretty funny. This interview is live for everybody, but he said he had no clue where he stood. As a matter of fact, he was thinking his football career was over when they called him in the office. So they called him into the office in the order that they were taking reps in practice.
Yeah. And
he was third. So he was like, listen, if I won the job, they would either call me in first or last. So I'm done. So he goes in, Zach, and he sits down, and he says, Gus starts talking and says, yeah, well, you did some good things this spring. There's lots you need to work on. The moment was built for maximum drama. But the last thing he was expecting, they ended, he said, you're going to be the starting quarterback at Auburn University. And he was shocked.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because he didn't work his butt off. It was because the coaches never really gave any indication who was leading the race. And he missed
do you think that'll happen this fall?
After talking to Harsin, I could see that.
Okay.
I could see them not giving anybody any true indication of where they're at. And that's from my conversations with the players. Mm-hmm. And I just wouldn't put any stock in any of the narratives that we've heard. I think the coaches are playing this one pretty tight to the vest because they want these guys to actually compete.
Wait, you wouldn't put any stocks in what narratives?
Any narrative that you hear out there right now, right? Because there's always these narratives that arise, but very few of them actually come from what's happening. It's like, again, people watch the A-Day and they say, oh, well, TJ didn't improve enough to start the job, or like I said, it's just not enough information.
I think we're at the point of the fan base. Well, I say this, but I think most people watching either of our shows understand that it's not about A-Day. Like any narrative that comes out of A-Day, I think is crazy.
Oh man, you'd be surprised at stuff I read. So, but I agree with you. Any narrative that came out of that is crazy. And because Todd missed the spring and walked in and won a starting job here at Auburn University in 8 practices, I would not put that past Calzada either. And he's got a lot more starting experience than Chris Todd did. So
yeah, and it sounds like he practiced plenty this spring too.
Yeah, I mean they act like he was limited, but the truth was he threw a lot this spring. Yeah. I think that was one of the narratives, that he was limited was overplayed. They kept him out of situations where he might get hit and re-injure that shoulder, but he threw a lot.
But in practice, I mean, your quarterbacks don't get hit anyway. So I'd love to know how different that actually was, you know?
Yeah. It sounded like he was talking about anything, even accidental contact. They were just trying to keep him out of any situation where a player might accidentally contact that surgically repaired shoulder.
Right.
But I really thought it was overplayed, the whole, he was limited this spring.
No, it sounds like he practiced plenty, which I think is great for the quarterback race. Whoever wins this quarterback job, does it result in some people leaving the program? We'll get Mike G's thoughts on that in just a moment. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. We've talked about it a lot on the show. Some of the future win totals, you can check all of those out for all Power 5 college football teams in 2022. Auburn still at 5.5 on BetOnline. So if you think Auburn will win 6 or more games, you need to head over to BetOnline and check out all the different lines that they have and throw some money down on your Tigers. Check it all out at BetOnline, where the game starts. Mike G, 5.5 wins. Before we jump into our last topic, 5.5 wins. Over, under?
I'm dropping a bag on the over.
It seems like easy money to me.
A whole bag. I'm dropping a whole bag. I'm dropping the future kids' tuition. I'm putting all those six games. They'll get 6.
I think so too. All right. So if somebody specifically wins the job this season, which obviously will happen, what do you expect the results to be as far as guys staying on campus and the personnel at the quarterback position at Auburn moving forward? And it's interesting because all of the 3 that are quote unquote competing have already all used their transfer. And so if they were to leave, they would have to sit out a season at wherever they go. And the timing of it all, if it happens early in fall and it's like, I'm not getting any reps anymore, you can just, all right, well, I'm not going to play this year anyway. So you can go ahead and just transfer and get out and just sit this season out anyway. So is there a chance that happens? And in your mind, if it did, who would be the most likely candidate for that?
Okay, so if last season has taught us anything, it's that you have to be ready. If you don't win this job, you cannot unplug. You can't check out because it could be your turn.
Sure.
For a number of reasons, whether the guy who wins it doesn't play well under the lights or has a rough start or gets injured or whatever, right? So, if somebody is to transfer, I don't think it'll be early. All 3 have incentive to wait it out this fall to see how the season plays out.
Even though for the future, the rest of their eligibility, you could go ahead and sit out and virtually not miss any time as you would if you were just the backup.
Yeah, I just think it would be a mistake. I think it would be a mistake by any of them that if they don't win this job.
I think I agree with you.
To check out. Yeah, to transfer.
There will be places throughout college football that have differing opinions. And it may happen in Auburn with other positions. You never know. But, I mean, if you get a lay of the land, it's like, man, I am just not going to play in 2022 where I'm currently at. Like, there's a lot of strategy and to just go ahead and jump in the portal.
Yeah, but if 2022 isn't your year, is Zach Calzada draft eligible after this year?
He was a redshirt.
I think he's draft eligible. You got to be 3 years removed from high school.
3 years, yeah.
He wasn't a freshman last year.
He was a redshirt player last year.
Right. So he's got it. I think he'd be draft eligible after this year. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios,
he was a redshirt
man.
Sophomore.
Just because you're not the guy this year, if you're, I don't know, man. Like, there's just a lot. There's a lot where you could really position yourself. I could see a scenario where everybody stays. One guy balls out and leaves.
He draft eligible after last year.
Okay, yeah. So, like, I could see a scenario possibly where one guy balls out and leaves.
Sure,
that's a potential scenario. And the number 2 is the front runner for the job going into next year. And the number 3 is the clear number 2 going into next year.
Yes.
So there's that scenario. But what you're talking about, if anybody's going to leave, I do think it would be after spring, and I actually don't think it'll be Robby. I think
after fall.
Yeah, I think
okay.
if I've had to,
you do or you don't think it'll be Robby?
I don't think it'll be Robby. I think if I had to pick a guy to transfer,
TJ,
it would be TJ. Number 1, because he would have had the most information from this staff. He's been here the longest of all of them. So he had a year and then another year to decide whether he wants to stay or go or not. And I think after 2 years, you definitely know where you stand with the staff. So if I had to put my money on somebody, it would be on the guy who's been here longer and collected more information.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, the other two just got here.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to sit out, so you might as well ride it out and at least through next spring to see where you stand. And I think they'll do that.
Mike G, how can people find you, hear you, watch you, support you, all that good stuff?
Listen, go find us on the YouTubes. We got plenty of patron content. We've got part 2 of the Harsin interview dropping this week on Thursday. And for our patron members, we have a Jason Jones interview that is live for everybody now. So go check that out.
Yep. All at the War Rapport. Be sure to check that out. Become a patron. It is absolutely worth it. We'll be back tomorrow. John Garcia. We're talking all things Cruton. Let's go. This has been Locked On Auburn.